started. And welcome to Business Succession Planning. I'm Jim Cunningham. I have Lonnie Martin here today joining me. We're going to go over some savvy tips on maximizing value. And this is very important. Disclaimer, we're going to talk about a lot of legal concepts, talk about a lot of business concepts. This is not legal advice, so don't run off and start doing stuff with what we discuss here. Please subscribe to our YouTube page. It's really important that you do that. So you can go ahead and click subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are watching it live, just go over to YouTube at some point and subscribe if you haven't done so already. This is a huge year for tax changes. And right now we're in the beginning of March of 2021. We're anticipating a lot of changes coming in with the Biden administration, and that's going to pretty much affect every American who earns money. So, and even if you don't earn money, it's going to affect you. But please do that and pay attention. We got a speaker here, Lonnie Martin. Lonnie is an experienced C-suite level executive, a Caltech grad, and a Harvard MBA. He worked for many, many years in the telecom industry, and he happens now to be my current Vistage chair. And we'll talk about what Vistage is. It's a CEO group. Any thoughts before we get started, Lonnie?
No. Hey, I'm glad to be here. Don't penalize me for the Harvard MBA, okay? And the BS and MS was in aeronautical engineering, something I almost never used in my career after getting it.
And then, of course, I'm Jim Cunningham, 25 years plus experience. We've got offices in the Capital Region, San Francisco Bay, and Southern California. I'm a certified specialist in estate planning, real estate broker, securities licensed, and insurance licensed. So as Chaucer said many, many years ago, 600 plus years ago, there is an end to everything. To good things as well. Sometimes they're not so good things, right? And in getting ready for this, Lonnie, we kind of posed the question, because you and I are at different stages in our professional,
yes,
in engaging, not just us personally, but engaging with professionals and business owners. Is I oftentimes represent clients who are retiring or going through the exit process once they've already determined that. But you're also involved with business owners, so. Any thoughts on this? Do people pay enough attention to the end and quitting, or are they just kind of mired in the today?
It varies amongst my, 30 to 35 owner CEO members as to how intentionally they think about the future of their business. Hey, the key reason to be in something like a Vistage CEO peer group is to get help increasing the value of your business. So you must have in mind someday the prospect of selling it. And depending upon your age, if you're in your 40s, you're probably not going to think too much about it because you got a long runway, unless you're just determined to retire very early, even in your 50s. So I would say it varies as to the intentionality of preparing to get a good price for your business, or put it where you want it to be at the time that you really would like to step away and enjoy life full time. Perhaps never think about it again, but also in some cases maybe you want to stay connected. So a variety of options, as you say there.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here is we're going to go over these in a little bit of depth here, but you got some options. You can just close the business and sell the assets, sell the equipment, kind of fire sale. You can give the business away. Sometimes people give it away. You can sell to an outsider. You can sell to an insider. An outsider is a third-party purchaser for value, right? Some stranger who comes in and buys, maybe a competitor. And an insider is typically the employees, but oftentimes they don't have the wherewithal to do it. Or you just wind it down. And so, here's what is not a plan. I'll retire in 5 years. That's not a plan, because I can tell you, I've talked to clients. I talked to clients 10 years ago and they said, I'm going to retire in 5 years. And I talked to them last week. They're like, I'm going to retire in 5 years. So that number just keeps getting pushed out.
It is always the answer.
5 years.
10 is too big a number. 5 is, it's long enough to be somewhat credible. But you're right, that the year after they say 5 years, it doesn't then become 4 years. It kind of stays 5 years. And it's just the prime indicator that we're really not thinking about it yet. It's not important. And, that has to do with how people are feeling personally in their family life and physically and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's a big chunk of non-business component to this, okay? And that fourth line down there is, what will you do then? So that's a really big one. And for many of my clients, the
Yes.
kids have left the house, you continue working, things are good, you've really figured out your industry, you've got it dialed down, maybe you're not working that much, you're making a lot of money. Why sell if the thing just keeps going on and on and on? Because you really haven't kind of thought about, well, maybe you have, what will you do after you sell your business, after that liquidation event?
It definitely needs to be part of the preparation, so to speak, of the person. They need to be thinking about what they're not just going to suddenly vegetate and do nothing, and not have any place to go during the day.
Yeah.
Some people figure it out and others don't, and then they realize what it feels like after they've sold their business.
And then they go find another business to buy.
Perhaps.
They get back into it. So yeah. So Anita says, haha, so true. I've been retiring in 5 years for 30 years. So,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. So there are 4 paths. And this was developed by Patrick Ungashik, who's with Navix Consultants out of Michigan, I believe. And Patrick has this business, and it's kind of a business with franchisees, but he spoke at our Vistage meeting, gosh, I don't know, 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago. And this was kind of his 4 paths. There's the passer, the outie, the innie, and the squeezer. Okay. So these aren't legal technical terms, right? But they're very, I think you understand what we're talking about here. So again, this is very high level. You can pass it to a family member. Now, some people say, I want my kids coming into the business and I'm going to pass that on to them. That is one type of structure. And that's really, oftentimes involves your estate planning attorney quite extensively, your business transactional lawyer, and sometimes a whole bunch of lawyers, frankly, because many times people need separate counsel. But there's the passer aspect. So we'll talk about what that is. The outie, it's going to an outside person, the key employee. I think in a lot of professional practices, Lonnie, I see people just squeeze out the value. So it depends on the business.
Yeah, I think in your profession, that is probably true. Probably the accounting profession is similar.
Yeah. And so some of this is industry specific. Real estate is another one. It may be that, if it's so dependent on you as the sales, as sort of the personal brand, those are some, I would say those are some challenges, quite frankly, in terms of maximizing value, unless you do some other stuff that we're going to talk about. So the passer is transferring your business for your family, for no consideration. That's a legal term meaning money, no consideration to a family member. So the parents pass it on to the kids. And if it's for consideration, so if you're actually not giving it to your kids or relatives or whomever, but getting money for it, then it starts looking more like an innie transaction. So an outie transaction is a sale to a third party, ideally top dollar. You got to make a decision. Do you use a broker? Do you not use a broker? And I can't tell you whether you should use a broker or not. I think that's a decision. That is a thought process you have to go through. And then readying the business for sale. That is what we're going to talk about here, which is, do you choose to grow the business or not? I will tell you, unless you have a growth mindset, your business is shrinking. Okay. And I'm just making a broad statement. Unless you have this mindset of growth, your business tends to shrink. And then you need to assess it's kind of a gut check. How important is it to you as the owner of keeping the enterprise going, the name, the processes, the staff? For many of my clients, they've kind of invested, frankly, most of their adult life in a business, and there's a deep emotional connection to it. And I think that's something that you need to be thinking about, because it may be that a buyer, and Lonnie, we see this, a buyer comes in and they say, look, I don't want your employees. I don't want your facilities. I don't want anything. I want your client list. That's it. And I'm going to shut everything else down. And if that's not something you want to do, then you need to kind of flesh that out early on in the due diligence process.
But typically, law firms are almost a special case. I get it. Accounting firm, same kind of thing. But then there's all the rest of the kinds of companies. And if you're of a mind to have the payday you deserve for all the hard work you put in, then the outie is the right way to go. You want to go back to that slide? I'm going to make a point. You want to make points as we go along, or?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's, typically the outie is kind of like the equivalent of listing your home on the multiple listing service and getting it out and exposing it to maximum market.
Yes. whether using a broker or not. Ideally, you get some competition going between multiple people interested in your business. And you might be able to do that on your own. On the other hand, I got to tell you, if it was my business, I would most likely prefer to have help, professional help. And, that's what a broker is supposed to do. Readying the business for sale. My gosh, there's a whole lot of issues in there. And that's not something you start 6 months from your sale date.
Right.
Wow. That really is a long runway, a year, multiple years, 3 to 5 years. If you talk to Patrick Gundershik, who, by the way, is out of Atlanta, great guy, involved in the preparation of a whole lot of businesses for sale, and had a lot of experience in transactions, he'll tell you that they have a program which is generally going to take 4 to 5 years to get to the point where you're really ready to get a great price. So,
yeah, this is not something where you get the letter of intent and you come to the advisors and you're like, okay, let's get maximum value.
Yeah, which is why it's funny. I don't. Perhaps it's a coincidence. I've seen his program that he. If you pay him some money or some of his consultants some money, it's about a 4 or 5 year program. Oddly, the same as the answer most people give. Well, I'll retire in 5 years. So if you never start the process, whether you do it on your own or with help, then you're just never advancing the wheel towards that place where your business is really going to be worth something meaningful to somebody.
So then the other one is selling to key employees. There are a lot of structures around this. You might have heard of an ESOP. That's basically a tax structure to reduce the overall tax bill when you sell a business. And these may be the only purchasers in certain industries. What I'm seeing is professional practices. So service industries, many times, if they're not commissionable services like insurance or financial services, many times the only way you can succeed to a practice is through in any transaction. So where the potential purchaser is an employee. And this is a tough one because I would say that many times the employees lack. First of all, many times the employees have no interest in owning a business. Okay, so that's really the fork in the road. Do you have a burning desire to own your own business and run your own business? Many people say no. Okay, they don't want to do it. But if you do find someone who is interested in it, this can be a little bit trickier because you got to figure out a way to pay for the business. And I remember that the example that Patrick gave is if you're selling a business for $4 million, could Lonnie repeat the name broker?
It's Patrick Ungashik. You had it on a slide earlier.
There's his name there, Ungashik, at the bottom there. But on the INI is, these can be kind of difficult because many times the purchaser is using after-tax dollars to pay the seller. So imagine if the seller wants $1 million and we're in California and basically taxes are 50% across the board. Just go with me on that.
Yeah.
So if you earn $2 million, if you earn $4 million, you pay $2 million in tax and you end up with $2 million, and then you turn around and you're the buyer and you turn around and you pay the seller $2 million, then the seller is going to pay $1 million in tax. So the seller only ends up with $1 million. There are more tax efficient ways to do that, typically on an INI transaction. So it might be that the seller says, look, once I build up my retirement account at this level, right, which is tax deductible dollars going in, of course it's taxable coming out, then I'm willing to sell. So there's a little bit more flexibility on an INI transaction. They typically are spread out over a longer period of time than an Audi transaction. The Audi transactions I've seen, Lonnie, I see a lot of clients selling their businesses for $5 to $10 million. And that's, kind of that level that starts attracting outside investors. They do end up paying without tax planning. You are paying 40, 50% of that, of the sales proceeds in taxes. So be mindful of taxes. Remember, Uncle Sam is a joint tenant on all your accounts. The squeezer, we'll finish with the squeezer, then move on to our other content. But, sometimes businesses are profitable with really good cash flow, but the industry lacks buyers. If you go, Lonnie, I don't know if you look at businesses for sale, but they're always accounting.
Not lately. I'm not lately. That
Yeah.
sounds like too much work.
Yeah, no, but there are many industries, and accountancy is one of them, where the accountant, maybe a 65-year-old accountant's doing 500 1040s a year.
Yep.
No one's going to buy that, right? There's a lot of those for sale, and I don't want
By
to
the
say,
way, yes, there's
and I'm not.
absolutely a
I'm just
point to
making a
be.
sweeping generalization.
No. But there's a point to be made there. Uh, there's a lot more interest in a bigger, profitable company than there is for a small company, even if it's profitable. I mean,
And then you have to look in your industry. Is there a low barrier to entry? Is it easy to get into your industry? You may have more competitors, and it's tougher. You might not have an any who can take over. And I do see this. Again, the smaller the business, the greater the potential for a squeezer. But many people do just kind of wring out the last drop of juice from the business and then just close the doors. So that, by the way, the reason I mentioned this is a legitimate way to exit a business.
for
And
sure, for sure.
there's nothing wrong with it. It's a choice that you make. So Lonnie, what does business succession planning mean to you?
Well, the key word is succession. Often when that term is used, it's about elevating somebody up the chain of command and, having a backup for the key leadership positions. That's often the way it's talked about. But yet it could also be applied to this topic, which is, what am I going to do with my business when I'm finished wanting to be in it, which is, I'm sure, what you're talking about. But by the way, you really have to do both, because if you're going to sell your business that you've been the owner leader of for many years, and if you've been so fortunate as to develop a leadership team so that you can walk away, or your business is so dialed in that it pretty much runs itself by the time of a transaction, which, by the way, would make it more valuable in the eyes of a buyer. And the only way you're going to get to that point is if you've groomed, key people to run the business. If you can, as you run a business and get older and older and want to take more time away, we've had this discussion, Jim. If you can imagine going away to Tahiti for 3 months, I'm always asking this question because it gets people thinking. Imagine that you went to Tahiti for 3 months. You were out of pocket. The question I always ask is, what information would you need to get on a regular basis? But not talking to anybody, just, send over email perhaps. What would you need to get to know that your business was clicking along just the way it was when you left? If your business is not in that state, then frankly, you're not probably ready to sell it for a great price. Back to the length of time it takes to have a business be able to be self-sustaining not without the owner being critical to its existence.
And there's a bit of a paradox in there, because I think it requires a heavy dose of humility, in the sense that the
Yeah,
owner is not needed in business. And a lot of people are like, I don't like that. I want to be needed. Okay.
sure.
Now, some people are like, I'm over it. I don't need to be needed. But what I see with some business owners is, it's almost like, well, what am I going to do if I'm not at work telling people what to do, and like kind of keeping it together? But the way you build value and the way you create a business that is more likely to sell for a higher price is that if you become, I don't want to say irrelevant, because as a leader, you're going to be relevant, or as an owner, you're going to be relevant. But really, if this thing can run on its own without you being there, those businesses trade at higher multiples, higher values than the ones that are so dependent on the business owner. But then if you've succeeded in being a shareholder and the business is running itself, you're like, well, why would I even want to sell? And that's where I think sometimes people, they pump the brakes on the sale, quite frankly, because they're making money and they're not doing much. But again, to get there is a lot of work.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's part of due diligence of a buyer. They're going to figure out how critical the owner is to the business and its future. Most owners are the key rainmaker in the business. Well, if you're not there anymore and there's no other key rainmaker, that's a problem. The business is not going to operate at the same level as when you were there. You can't let that happen. So hence, you need to have people in key roles that really can carry the water.
Yeah, and this really, this sort of business succession planning, this umbrella we're kind of putting over everything,
Mhm.
is not an event. It's not something you go, oh, business succession planning. Okay, when I'm ready to sell my business, I'm going to start that. You need to have a plan in place. This is, again, as we said, a multi-year endeavor. And then what are some best practices in maximizing value? I mean, if we can just kind of go down a laundry list. I mean, is it any thoughts on that, Lonnie?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, several. You hopefully do not have a heavy dependency on any particular small number or single client. A buyer wants to see many clients, ideally repeat business clients. I mean, that'll vary depending upon the type of business. The buyer certainly wants to see, back to what I said earlier, a strong management team other than the owner. The buyer will want to see processes in place that keep the business running well. Um, I mean, it will want to see all kinds of things. They'll want to be convinced that the strategy of the business is appropriate for the future. I mean, really, what they're evaluating is the future of the business, not what the business did, and that's a frame of mind that really has to be thought about. So you worked 20 years, you worked hard, you got the business to a great place. It showed growth all along the way. That's interesting, but that's not totally indicative of the future when you leave the scene. The buyer's
And
only interested in the future.
it's interesting you mentioned that, because I do hear people say, I've been building this business for 20 years. Certainly it's worth something because of all my 20 years of effort. That's not going to get you very far.
Yeah,
Okay. It's the future revenue that the buyer's looking
yeah.
at, right? They don't care what happened in the last 20 years.
So therefore, the slope of the growth of the business at the point of sale is important. You can't go flat. And of course, the wrong time to sell is a year or two after you have gone flat. In other words, now it just depends on how much money you think you deserve for the business you worked hard for. It, I'm just saying that the price will be higher if the business looks like it has a bright future at the point of sale. And they're going to look for every indicator they can about that. They're going to look at your market share, your competition, your positioning strategy, level of profitability, of course. They're going to crawl all over the business and ask themselves, if I buy this business, now, of course, they usually always have a strategy, and sometimes it means combining your business with theirs because they're in the same or similar business. So it's not like they don't know how to take hold of your business and run it, but sometimes they would like to think that you really have a well-run business that can keep going further and maybe even improve their business.
Yeah. So I would say probably the biggest mistake that I see people making is not engaging their people early on enough, and then also being open to advisors that have special knowledge and special training on something that maybe your current advisors don't necessarily have. So you may have a great CPA, but that CPA may or may not be able to deal with some of the larger issues that are coming in, as well as the lawyer. Many times people will have a family business lawyer. Sometimes there are more specialty lawyers in M&A, mergers and acquisitions. Estate planning lawyers are going to oftentimes be involved. Tax planning lawyers, that's very important. So taxation, obviously, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And then there are other affiliated professionals that you need to look at, the brokers, appraisers, and some industries are regulated. So you've got your regulatory advisors. But I would say that probably the biggest mistake in succession planning is not engaging and kind of assembling your A team, for lack of a better.
Yeah, a team is definitely the key word. It takes a team. And depending upon the situation, all the kinds of people you mentioned are key team players. And there should be a team leader. And I guess you could decide who that is or have it be yourself. And I will just caution and say that a typical corporate counsel type of attorney that you may have used throughout your career for business matters is often not the same as a deal attorney. In other words, it's a skill to be on your side and construct good deal transactions.
Yeah, and I will say just for, if you're watching this video, there is increasing specialization in the legal field and in the medical field. So those are the ones that we're seeing really, it used to be 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I don't even know if there were many medical specialists. So you just went to your doctor and they prescribed a course of treatment. Well, now it's, you go to your general practitioner and they refer you out. The same with lawyers it's subspecialty within subspecialty. So I want to give you something really tangible as we go through this, because we're kind of talking pie in the sky a little bit, a lot about it, just kind of conceptual, but I really would like to cover these 5 things in a little bit of depth. And the first one is consider joining a peer group. And I will tell you, this is not an advertisement. I'm just, my idea here is just to share how I've benefited, quite frankly, from some of these strategies, and I've seen other people benefit them as well. So I think that the question, Lonnie, if you want to kind of walk us through this, is do you get a coach, a consultant, or a peer group? And what is the difference between a coach, a consultant, and a peer group?
Yeah, let me go back in reverse order. First of all, a peer group, I think you're really talking about, there's different kinds of peer groups, but the one that I think you and I would advise owner CEOs join is a CEO peer group. In other words, people around the table have the same kind of 24/7 pressures and are the key decision makers as you, and best from a variety of businesses. We have a saying at Vistage: none of us are as smart as all of us. There's another one that you don't know what you don't know, and you won't know what you don't know until you mix with peers from different perspectives, really different perspectives. By the way, there's also, I'm going to call it industry specific, vertical market peer groups. Some of my members belong to both kinds. For example, if you're a construction company, there are construction company peer groups. And I often tell people, well, Vistage is not really a replacement for that. And if you're getting value out of it, you should keep doing it. Vistage is a place to kind of open the blinders. A consultant is a term, frankly, I think it's usually used, for specific projects, and hence the term technician. You've got something, I don't know, you want to implement a new CRM system. It might help to get a consultant to take you through that process. And when they're done, they're done. You don't see them again. Coach implies a more continuing relationship. Of course, Jim, that coaching is part of the Vistage CEO peer group concept. So I show up and talk to Jim once a month to kind of augment the kinds of stuff that he gets from the peer group experience meeting once a month. It's helpful if they're a generalist, for sure. They usually are. They usually people that have been around a lot of blocks. They maybe have been in the CEO seat, owner CEO seat a time or two themselves. They have a lot of contacts, a lot of just things that they have done, which if you've been heads down with blinders on, you would benefit from. So, and it really is a sidekick or a helper. As Jim knows, I refer to myself often as a helper in my twilight years. I spend my life helping people like Jim increase the value of their business. So, and by the way, if people are of that ilk, that's where they get juice. By the way, it's a great existence for somebody that has run a business for a long time, one or more businesses, and doesn't want to hang it up. That was my situation. And lucky me, I came upon Vistage, which gave me an opportunity to help people. Vistage isn't, as that slide shows, is not the only peer group business around. I think we are the largest by member count, 24,000 across 15 countries. EO is kind of a derivative from YPO. And then there's some other groups that have sprung up around the peer group concept.
Yeah, and I just put these in here just to let people know that there's not just one, but
Yeah, for sure.
peer groups, and it's, you have to find your own path on this. But I would really recommend, if you're looking at selling your business, there really are some real benefits, and just as a consumer of those services, I hear perspectives I would never hear or could cook up on my own, and it's great to
Well,
be a peer group with another industry.
here's the deal.
Yeah.
When you participate in something like this, I guess I will ask you, it's supposed to force you to get away from the business in order for you to work on the business, as we say, not in the business. Most owner CEOs spend almost all their time, if not all their time, in the business. They actually are involved in the fray of the operation, the transactions, the selling, whatever. That's cool. They're really good at it. But they typically, it's almost like deferring the decision to sell your company. They defer the decision to step back. And that's what a peer group is really about. Stepping back in a learning environment. It's probably the best way to put it. If you don't give yourself that chance, then you're probably not going to pick up things that you wouldn't otherwise pick up. I mean, there's a reason that the data shows Vistage member companies grow 2.2 times, as we're told, faster than non-Vistage member companies and are more profitable. So maybe there's a little bit of self-selection going on amongst Vistage members, but I got to tell you, there's also, because I've seen it happen, things that people bring back into their business that it wouldn't have dawned on them to do. So
Yeah, and when you're an owner too, it's a bit of an echo chamber. You're listening to yourself. It's that the emperor has no clothes. You're not necessarily going to get candid input. And the other thing too, I had this realization is, when you own the business, you can't fire yourself and you can't quit. I mean, so if you own the business,
yeah,
this is, it's, I think it's important to step outside of the business and just get some really people with no agenda, and they're not beholden to you.
yeah. That's what a peer group's about. The only agenda is to help and be helped. That's it. And
So Vistage, for example, some of these peer groups have networks. So there are speakers, so that the cadence, what Vistage looks like, and I can only speak to that one. That's the only peer group I've been in. Many times we meet monthly. Many times there's a speaker. We start meeting at 7:30. The speaker starts at 8. Many times goes to 10. Then we have a conversation after the speaker, and then we do individual issue processing where individual members step forward and they're like, okay, I'm having this problem with this thing. What's going on? Okay, let's talk about it. And there's a structure for discussing the issues. One of the benefits I've found is that when we internally process issues in our law firm, business related issues, is I use that same format. And if you do it long enough, it just becomes intuitive. So it's almost like I don't want to say like parliamentary procedures, but there's a structure to discuss an issue that helps you define it, discuss it, come to a resolution, then close it and move on. Which is nice. So, and peer group fees, I think they range 5 to 30,000 is kind of the range that we're seeing. Okay, Supreet asks, it seems Vistage accepts companies that do over 5 million in business. Is there another CEO group recommendation for businesses that are starting off?
Well, I say in Vistage, there's no rules. But yes, it's probably true that most of our members are certainly 3 to 5 million or above. If I had to guess, my average revenue, but the band is wide, is probably 20 or $30 million a year. But it just depends. I care a lot about personally. Vistage operates by having chairs like me set up the groups that we want. And then we kind of run the groups and as part of that, coach the members. I often say that I'm looking for kind of upward and to the right people and situations, learners, aspirations to grow. I've got members below 5 million for sure. But there are other kinds of programs. I think the Metro Chamber has It kind of depends on the stage of the company. There's Startup Sacramento, which helps, just absolutely raw entrepreneurs. I'm actually a mentor in that kind of program for people just starting out. Metro Chamber has, I think, a couple programs. A couple of the chambers, Asian and Hispanic, I think, have programs for small companies.
So Chamber of Commerce is a good resource to go to.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
good.
Mhm.
All right. So how do you join a peer group? You find the people in control and you find a chair. You can get help from corporate. It looks like Supreet was kind of looking online and what the minimum was, but I guess you just go to their website and I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go to all those. They've all got websites.
Again, you mentioned Vistage companies grow, and this is not like an ad for Vistage, but I think people who join peer groups are probably more interested in their business, and so it would be interesting to see if the other peer groups, if you just joining a peer group, if your growth is going to be
Yeah.
faster and
By the way, Jim, as you know, Vistage is, I think, 65 or 6 or 7 years old. It's been able to collect a lot of data and compare it. Non-Vistage members, by the way, is the average D&B listed company, not a member of Vistage. So there's that population, and then they got the Vistage population, and so that's how they've aggregated the data. I don't know about EO or Renaissance or some of those others, what they've been able
So
to
if
do.
you're interested in Vistage, you can go there. And 800 chairs, and it's a worldwide organization. So go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page. Stay abreast of this stuff. Super important that you stay. We're going to have a lot of tax stuff coming out this year. Let's talk about paying attention to macroeconomic factors. So there macroeconomic factors means what is the United States economy doing? Okay. You need to pay attention to this because I think people don't pay enough attention to this. I think you get sort of fixated in your own little bubble, your own little chamber, and you're thinking about your business, and you might watch the news, you might Google stuff. But let's talk about what's out there because, we live in a consumer-centric economy, whether you're business to B2B, which is business to business, or business to consumer, or business to government. And this is very important. Not every industry has the same business cycle. So when you hear, the economy's in recession, it's contracting. Well, some businesses benefit from a contracting economy. Some businesses don't. And so there are different economic cycles. Do you want to talk about that, Lonnie?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This is pretty important because it definitely should influence timing of any future sale of your company. You'd like to sell it near the top, so to speak. Although people say you never pick the top or the bottom in the stock market. It's macroeconomic trends are maybe a little more obvious. And Jim, one of my favorite books for CEOs is Make Your Move, written by the Bolio brothers, two economists, twin brothers, actually, who Vistage has followed for many years. It's important to know the state of the cycle in your business. Most cycles are sinusoidal or sinusoidal-like. The Bolios identify an A part of the cycle, B part, C part, and D part. What often happens is when I came up to Sacramento, I came up in 2010. This place had certainly suffered through the real estate collapse, that whole debacle. It was still kind of on its knees. If you carry that, if you don't recognize that the economy has turned around and you remain a scaredy cat, then your competitors are going to move ahead of you. The whole point of the Bolio book, Make Your Move, is know where you are in your cycle in order to know whether to be bold or to be somewhat concerned or to hunker down. In other words, to try best you can to get it right. And so it certainly pays to follow macroeconomic trends and how your business in your sector relates to macroeconomic trends.
And one is, one of our Vistage members is in the collision repair business. One of the things he follows is miles driven. And that is a leading indicator. So if miles driven starts declining, he knows that his collisions are going to decline. So whatever your whatever it is in your particular industry, you need to know what it is and pay attention to it. And then also let's talk about key inputs and what that means. So I think every business takes in stuff, does stuff, and then has output. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's just the basic function of business. So you can take in, in a service business, you take in a client, you perform labor services, and then there's an output. Manufacturing, raw goods, and you kick out manufactured goods. And it's very important that you pay attention. If you can walk us through this willingness to pay, um, and having irrational competitors, because this happens in industries. What I see in certain industries is there'll be an aggregator that comes along and they're like, I'm just going to buy up as much market share as I can. And then as you're in the business and you're like, well, what's this person doing? Because now they're making it harder for me to earn a living. If you can just walk through that.
Yeah, for sure. This is wow. This is a really important page. Every business is in business to create some value for somebody. On either side of that value that they've created, if you viewed it as a, I don't know, horizontal bar, you've got the cost of inputs in a labor only business. Okay, it's just labor. If you're a manufacturer and you got to buy, a bunch of piece parts and then put them all together, you got piece parts and labor to make your product. So certainly got to pay attention. In fact, I just saw recently some graphs on the price of tin and copper and some metals, which are actually pretty important in the economy. Of late, their value has increased. You probably have heard about ocean freight. So many people are getting things from China, some as their source of supply. Wow, ocean freight rates have really escalated, creating real problems for some people. So anyway, you got these inputs, just like your slide says. And then on the output side is things which can affect the willingness to pay of your customer. In other words, let's say you are in a business and there's 5 other competitors that really sell kind of the same thing and they look the same to a consumer. The rule when somebody buys something is if it looks the same as somebody else, or looks like there's 5 providers of something that all look the same to me, then why would I do anything but pay for the lowest price? So you don't want to have a business, obviously, where you have a lot of direct competition, but that takes strategy, that takes deciding, and not something that happens overnight. To have some positional advantage in the market or some value proposition which is unique, where you don't have many competitors, if any, then you should be able, if somebody really is interested in your product, to be able to price at as high a price as they're willing to pay and not have somebody beating you down. So this page is central. By the way, along the way of, you produce a product, and then you put it out in the market. Some people take their product through channels of distribution, for example. I got a product and my channel is Amazon or it's Raley's or it's whatever. You're giving up some of the value you've created to them. If that's okay with you, that's cool. But if there's a way to go straight to customers and get all of that gross margin for yourself, although you may have to spend some marketing dollars to do it, then that's a way to capture more value. I just bought something. I just naturally went to Amazon this morning to buy something. Of course, I can find it on Amazon. It's a consumer product. And after I bought it, of course, it'll be delivered tomorrow. You got to love Amazon. I said, why didn't I go to the maker's website, who I know and have confidence in? And lo and behold, they had the very same item, free shipping, and a little bit cheaper. Looked like about 70% cheaper. Well, I'll probably do that next time. But in this case, if I had done that, the manufacturer was going to collect, more of the created value than they were giving up to Amazon. Actually, when I bought it, it wasn't just Amazon. It was some other provider that actually had the product on their shelf, really kind of a retailer or distributor. So 2 people were getting cut in on that product that I could have gotten straight from the manufacturer. Anyway. it's a strategy thing.
Let's talk about business hygiene. So, what does that mean? Tell me what, because here's what I think about business hygiene. Sometimes people run even larger businesses. They don't necessarily run them like a business. It's like, well, we don't really have an employee manual. We're not, yeah, we just kind of keep track of stuff ad hoc. We're running, I got 3 cars I'm running through, paying my kids' college through. You really need to, if you are going to have this idea of, hey, I'm going to sell in 5 years.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to sell in 2026. It helps if you put a date on there, not in 5 years. I'm going to sell on this date. You need to start cleaning up your books is the bottom line. Okay. So clean up your books, clean up your processes. Documenting your process is very important. I know one of our Vistage members, Lonnie, who sold his business. He went through this pretty extensive process of documenting everything that they did. Right. And so, because what happens when a buyer shows up, they'll say like, okay, well, let me see what you have. Where are your processes? Because all they really can ask for is paper, right? Or
Yeah.
electronic stuff. You gotta commit this stuff. So walk us through a little bit about business hygiene. Then we're going to talk about a new California labor law that you need to pay attention to.
Oh, for sure. Well, it was just as you're talking, it just occurred to me that in all likelihood, really active in the business owner CEOs, their mere presence and their experience and their knowledge and their paying, of course, they're paying attention, can make up for a lot of sins. So while they're there, the business can run perfectly fine because they're always noticing things that if they're not quite right, they'll fix on the fly and they'll not even realize it. A buyer wants to see, again, when you depart the scene, um, even if you say even if you're, even if you're gonna, you say you're gonna stick around, or the deal forces you to stick around because there's a payout or whatever, they have to ask themselves if the business can pretty much run on itself. So this is back to what I said earlier, and that only happens when you've got well-documented processes that are being adhered to. And whether it's about labor or manufacturing or safety or quality or all manner of things, engineering, a well-documented business is probably going to be a well-run business if people are following the written word. It's one thing to have a document. And in the case that you mentioned, I think we both know that was done a little bit late. The company really didn't give itself a chance to. I mean, it's not easy stuff, and that was a manufacturing business, a pretty complicated one.
When you say it's not easy, it's a total pain in the neck. I mean, let's just be honest. It's
Well,
a pain
it's
to not.
something.
It's like of all the things you could do in the world,
Yes.
documenting a process that's so obvious to everyone. Like, give me a break. But folks, if you're going to sell your business and you want top dollar, a buyer is going to want to see this. If you don't have it, you're not going to get as much money. That's just a fact. Okay.
Well, by the way, if you're having to do this yourself, then you have another kind of problem, which
There
is
you go.
no leadership. So
labor law compliance, something very important to understand is even if it's an asset sale, okay, and you're a buyer, you are liable for certain labor law violations going back. How many years is it? 4 years?
I think 3. What I heard a few days ago.
This is new in California. Nuts. Okay. Just crazy. So bear in mind, if you're selling, you're going to be responsible for that as this. But by the way, if you have an S corporation, most of those transactions are what are called asset sales. So that's where the assets are sold and, the corporation kind of shuts down, but you can have this legacy labor law issues because sometimes there'll be a labor law violation that doesn't rear its ugly head for a year. Now, California's said in the context of an asset sale. So if you're a buyer buying S corp assets from a seller, you take on that liability. So it's something that if you're on the buying side, you're going to want to definitely include in your some type of clawback or some other type of provision to deal with that. Because a lot of this stuff, again, won't manifest itself until some time has passed. So how do we know the difference between a good deal and a bad deal? So what does a seller want? I want a big fat check.
A seller should want a big fat cash check for the whole Megillah. They should want to be able to walk away cold turkey. No contingencies, of course, but yet there's almost always going to be some portion of the price withheld for some period of time. they don't want an earn out. They want all their money now. Obviously, this is a negotiated kind of trade-offs.
But these are the starting points. What does the buyer want? They have the opposite perspective. They want this,
No money down, or a pittance, 10% down. We will pay you from the business that we now control over time based on its performance.
Uh-huh.
Which, by the way, you need to stick around in order to be sure that performance happens.
You need to work your butt off to pay yourself for the business that the buyer's buying. So this is a little comical, but these are the two extremes.
Yes.
And deals fall somewhere in the middle. So when does a buyer write a big check? Because we do see buyers write big checks. Okay. You do need competent, robust systems and a bunch of recurring customers, not a few. You need a great competitive advantage, a growing business. You're not one where the profits are going down and it's stopped growing. And frankly, that's when a lot of people kind of get down in the dumps and they're like, man, this business isn't what it used to be. I'm at this down economic cycle. Life sucks. I just want to sell everything and get out of here. That is not the time to sell. Okay. The time to sell is when everything is A+. It's, 10, it's all just off the charts. Everything's great. But many times people don't want to sell because it's going so good. But that's actually when you do want to sell. So the idea is, how do you get from this point to that point? That takes work. Okay. And it's not done in a year or two. And I think planning a 5 or 10 year, frankly, 10-year time horizon. So if I meet with somebody and they say, Jim, I got about another 8 or 9 or 10 years, and when should I start planning on my exit? I would say now, consider joining a peer group, consider getting all your systems and processes in place, because you don't know what's going to happen. You may have a liquidation event significantly earlier. There may be some macroeconomic forces that change. There may be a big aggregator that comes in, right? If you manufacture XYZ widgets and the XYZ widget aggregator comes in and they say, we're going to buy up the 1,000 firms across the country that make XYZ widgets, you may be participating in that roll up. And what I mean by a roll up is somebody has a big gob of money and they go out and they buy a bunch of companies and put them into a much larger company, many times taking them public. Any thoughts on this confidentiality and non-competes? Assuming you can have this in your industry.
Yep.
These are some important things.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking of the word strategy because we may be making this sound pretty goddamn hard to do. You've made the point that it takes a while. It should. And the word strategy came to mind. The strategy of the business today may look very good and give you a good position, and you may be able to capture most of the value you're creating and not have too much competition. Things change. So don't think that the strategy you've got today, as you look forward to 5 to 7 years to sell your business, you're going to have to be continually modifying your strategy all along the way. It's not a static kind of topic. And so there's going to be strategy decisions, large and small, all along the way in order to keep the growth path going.
In many ways, it's kind of like it's not some fixed process. And I'm glad you mentioned this, Lonnie. It's not a fixed process because we don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. I mean, imagine if we went back 2 years ago and we said, look at all the stuff that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody would believe. Last 12 months, nobody would believe it. They'd be like, that's crazy. That'll never happen.
Yeah.
But it's a journey. Okay. It's a process. And do you make adjustments along the way? Absolutely. Anonymous asks, will this webinar be archived or recorded so a client can watch? Yes, it'll be in our YouTube channel. Is there a tax benefit if you turn your business over to a family member, or tax liability for the receiving end? Not so much like a statutory carve out for a family member, but you frankly, because they're family, I think you have a lot more planning options, a lot more flexibility, because there typically is a much higher level of trust, or not, with family members. I guess it depends on the family. So what do you do? So what's your action item? So even if you're considering transferring your business over the next 5 to 10 years, and I'll go out as far as 10 years, I personally think, and Lonnie, I think you'll agree with me, you should do everything possible to increase the value of your business. Now, if you're trying to pass your business to your kids, okay, and you want some low gift taxable value or something like that, maybe you want to make that transfer when you're in a dip, when your company has a low valuation. I think that would be the sole exception. But really, you should be doing everything you can to increase the value of the business. And I don't think this is something that you should do on your own. Whether you can or you can't. I just think it's a lot harder, because my experience has been there's so much benefit in speaking with people with different agendas who are not, they're not related to you. They're not employed by you. So you really do get an independent perspective. And I really would consider either a consultant, coach, or peer group, or all of it. Okay. I think there's a tangible benefit if you say, you know what, I know I'm going to be out of this business in 3 years. I think hiring a consultant like the Navix we talked about, the Patrick Ugashik, is a good consideration. The coaching route, if you're really conflicted on like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do post business? And
Yeah.
you need to figure that out. And that's almost like, I don't want to say like a psychotherapist, but don't be afraid. No, seriously though, because if you've been working 50 years doing something, what are you going to do? Like,
Hey, it's they say that a lot of people's health really suffers.
Yeah. Don't minimize that. We kind of like joke about it a little bit, but it's not a joke. No. Okay.
Yeah.
And then a peer group. And also, I would say read a lot of books, because I'm a reader. I'm a lifelong learner. But I'll open it up here as we close in the next few minutes here. We come up on our hour. I'll open it up for questions. But Lonnie, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really value your input and your insight. And you and I have been working together for, 10 years now. And I know you've helped a lot of people. You've mentored not only me, but a lot of other people as well. So
hey, I've enjoyed it. Always fun. This is what I do. This is what my life is now, Jim.
Right. Zoom.
Helping others. Well, Zoom too.
Yeah, right. All right. So we'll give it a couple more minutes for any questions. Otherwise, Lonnie, thank you very much.